All right, if you're a parent, I'm gonna bet you've had the screen time fight. We all have. But what if the answer isn't about setting timers or, just taking the devices away? In this explainer, we're gonna dive into one family's story that uncovers a surprisingly simple and honestly a much more effective solution.
We could argue all day about how many hours of screen time is too much, but sooner or later, that stops being the most important question. The real question, the harder one, is this: what on earth can actually compete with screens for our kids' attention?
And that leads to this really key idea. The source material for this story argues that screens aren't actually the villain here. They're just really, really good at filling a void, at filling that empty space. So the challenge isn't just to restrict the screens, it's to find something truly meaningful to put in that space instead.
So to really dig into this, we're going to follow a personal story from a parent who decided to try a little experiment right in their own home, looking for a real-world alternative to just, passively staring at a screen.
Okay, so the scene here is something a lot of parents will probably recognize immediately. We've got an 8-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. And while they're different in a lot of ways, they have one major thing in common. The second they get bored, the pull of a screen is incredibly strong. They were the perfect test subjects for this. Now, and this is important, this parent did not go into this thinking it was going to be some magic cure. Actually, they were pretty skeptical. And for good reason. They had been down this road before with all those so-called educational kits and knew exactly how they usually end up.
Yeah, this slide really lays it all out. On the left, you've got your typical kit. That flash of excitement that lasts about 5 minutes, the need for an instant result, and then it's in the back of a closet forever. But the promise of this particular kit, a crystal growing kit, was the total opposite. It was all about observation, about waiting, and about hands-on discovery. Everything a screen is.
And that, right there, was the big question. The whole experiment kind of hinged on this. Could an activity that is designed to be slow possibly hold the attention of kids who are completely wired for the instant dopamine hit of games and videos? It's a great question.
Okay, so the experiment is on. And what happened next? Well, it was genuinely surprising, especially when you think about how differently the two kids went about doing the exact same activity. This is just fascinating. This table shows how the same exact activity hooked these two very different kids. The daughter was all about how it looked, the color, the beauty, making something special. Her older brother, though, he was all about the process, the science, the steps, how it all worked. But look at the outcome. They were both equally and quietly engaged.
And this right here is the line that just says it all. In that quiet moment of downtime, the exact moment a screen would normally come out, nobody even asked for one. The process itself, the waiting, was enough to keep them completely focused.
Which brings us to the most surprising part of this whole thing. That one part of the experiment the parent was sure would be a deal breaker, the waiting, it actually turned out to be the secret ingredient. It was its most powerful feature.
So how did the slowness actually work its magic? Well, this timeline breaks it down. It wasn't just dead time. Every single day, the kids would literally run to check on it, to see the tiny changes, to make their predictions. The anticipation built up over the whole week, and the process itself became the reward.
So here's the big takeaway, right? The slowness, the delay, became the activity's greatest strength. Instead of just consuming something that was already finished, they were active participants in its creation. They were invested in a way it's impossible when you're getting that constant, instant feedback from a screen.
And that all leads to this quote, which is really the heart of this entire explainer. Screens don't lose because they're bad. They lose when real-world experiences become meaningful again. This experiment didn't just distract them from the screen. It filled that empty space with real, authentic curiosity. So yeah, the crystals are done. They look cool, but the experiment was never really about the crystals, was it? It was about the skills, the mindset that were being built while they waited. So let's look at what actually stuck with them after it was all over. What really lasted was, well, pretty profound. It was a new willingness to just slow down. A real tangible pride in creating something physical. And maybe most important, a new comfort with having to wait for a result. I mean, these aren't small things. They are foundational life skills that screens just don't teach. So in the end, the parent realized this thing wasn't just a toy or just another science project. It was what it truly was, an alternative path. It was a gentle but really effective way to start reshaping habits, not by force, but by offering something way more interesting to do.
And that's what we're left with, this really powerful thought. What if the antidote to all our screen time battles isn't another rule or another timer, but creating a better, more engaging reality that our kids can actually choose for themselves?